Hey guys, so on the Forza subreddit lately I've been seeing a whole lot of people asking, how do I drift? Alright, so before I get into this, I want to explain and disclaim a few things. Number one, being good at drifting is not about having the best tune. It's really more about learning how to control your tune more than having a really good tune. Alright, secondly, I am not the best drifter, nor do I make the absolute best tunes. Otherwise I'd be number one on the leaderboards right now, which I'm not. I feel I'm well versed enough in drifting and tuning my own cars to be able to help you guys out who really want to get into it. Alright, third guide is for people who really want to get into tuning and they want to know every aspect of the tuning options and every aspect of the upgrades and how it affects your car and how you can use those different things in order to get the highest scores in all the drift zone. I'm going to do that in order to show you guys how much of a difference a good tune can make. So there you go. Now I'm going to head back to the top, and I'm going to reset this tune back to stock. Alright, so as you guys can see, so now I'm going to do a run with this default tune in order to show you guys how much of a difference a good tune can make. The car snaps back way too fast and it can't get and keep as much angle as the tuned version can. So now we're going to go back to the garage and picking a good car. There's only two things that you need to steer clear of when making a drift car. Those two things are mid and rear engine cars and cars that aren't or can't be converted to rear wheel drive. Mid and rear engine cars can be identified by this little graph right here. As you can see, this little white brick thing, which is the engine, is located in the middle of the car. This means the engine is mounted behind the driver. Mid and rear engine cars are cool, but they are not really ideal for drifting. When you're choosing a drift car, just make sure it's front engine. Best of the best cars, as of right now, is the 1997 BMW M3 Horizon Edition. For reasons I'm not 100% sure on, the Horizon Edition of this car has almost twice as much steering angle as this non-Horizon Edition right here. Now I'm in the 1997 BMW M3 Horizon Edition. Look at how much steering angle this thing has. It glitches through the fenders and everything. It's clearly way more than the non-Horizon Edition, and way more than any other car I can think of right now. My theory is that it's because the drift boost skills of the Horizon Edition version of this. So it's possible that the Focus RS has just as much steering angle as this, but I'm not sure because I don't have one. Now that we're almost 10 minutes into the video, let's get into upgrades. I'm going to start with drivetrain. Alright, for all of these you want race. For the clutch, a race clutch will give you faster shift times, which is crucial for transitioning or entries where you have to dump a lot of speed and downshift, because if you don't shift fast enough in that scenario, you're not going to be able to get the wheels spinning again, and then you'll probably either spin out or just head to the center of the track. For a transmission, obviously you want race for the same reason of the clutch. It's just faster shift times. For the driveline, you definitely want race because it improves throttle response and it's crucial for getting the revs back up when you're about to get traction. For the differential, it's very important to have this because this allows us to adjust the differential acceleration and deceleration rates in the tuning options. Alright, up next is platform and handling. You're going to want race brakes, obviously, because you need that stopping power in order to sit on the e-brake and milk those points out. Valley springs and dampers is the best because this allows you to have softer springs, and that means more body roll, which helps you keep angle. Alright, you're going to want race, front, and rear anti-roll bars. This unlocks the anti-roll bar section in the tuning options, and we'll get into that. You're either going to want completely no roll cage at all, or a full race cage. The way to identify if you need either is the weight distribution of the car. As you can see here, this BMW has 50-50 weight distribution. If you have a roll cage, it evens out the weight distribution of your car, so this car in particular doesn't need it that much. If your car is 55 per se weight distribution, you're going to want a roll cage in order to even that out. Now weight. If your car is around 23 to 2400 pounds, which I consider a little bit too light, you're going to want the roll cage in order to add that extra weight. If your car is too heavy, regardless of your weight distribution, too heavy, maybe be around 3,000 after weight reduction, you're probably not going to want a roll cage. Alright, weight reduction. This one's pretty easy. You're almost always going to want race weight reduction. This helps even out the weight distribution and also makes your car lighter, obviously. Now, it's kind of the same deal with chassis reinforcement. You need to pay attention to your weight distribution and your weight. If your car is a little bit too light, which is around 23 to 2400 pounds, you might want to consider sport weight reduction instead of race. If your car is too heavy, you definitely... Alright, conversions. This is where a lot of preference comes into play. I'm going to start with body kits because it's pretty easy to explain. The body kits in this game allow you for a higher max tire width, so you're always going to want the body kits, and they're really sexy, so why wouldn't you have one? The drivetrain, you're always going to want rear-wheel drive. Alright, for the sake of speed in this video, I'm not going to go over the differences between every single engine option. If you really want to know the differences between i4, i6, boxer engines, V6, V8, V10, and V, for the sake of speed, like I said, I'm just going to go through the three options right here. Stock powertrain, it's a pretty linear power band. As you can see, the green line is pretty straight. This 2.6 liter i6 right here is, like it says, TT, that means twin turbo, so it has turbos. Turbos introduce turbo lag, which is why this green line right here goes gradually up until a point where it hits what's called max boost. This recommend if you're new to try out both types of engines. I personally like turbo lag because it allows me to transition better. If you want torque down low, then go for a V8, but I'm personally going to go for this 2.6 liter i6 twin turbo. Alright, so as you can see, the aspiration conversion has gone because you can't switch the aspiration for this, but just so you know, it is twin turbos. Alright, so now we're going to get into engine modifications. Now if you start out with a very high powered car, you're going to want to be careful about what things you upgrade. But for a starter, you want to upgrade exhaust to race, camshafts to race, which is very important because race camshafts increase your rev limit, which is very important for drifting because that's where you're going to be in drifting. Displacement, it makes the engine more responsive, which is pretty important, and then the flywheel, of course. Once all these things are upgraded, if you have around 700 horsepower already, then you're going to want to leave everything else alone. If you don't have that much horsepower, you're going to want to increase everything else in turn until you have that much. Be careful about upgrading the twin turbos too much without upgrading the other things first, because this will result in a whole ton of turbo lag, and too much of that can obviously be a bad thing. Alright, now for tires, and I personally prefer 18s and 19s. The reason why I described in my Reddit post. If you want to go see that, go check it out. But just for the sake of speed, I'm just going to choose 18s right now. Alright, now that we got 18s on the car, we're going to want to choose our tire compound. Now, this is where it kind of gets tricky. The Horizon Edition cars only allow for race tire compound and rally tire compound. If you're doing competitive drifting, most leagues will not allow you to use race tires. It's been this way since Forza 4, I believe, or maybe even before. But I prefer to use race tires. If you're trying to compete for the top spots in the leaderboards, you're going to want race tires. Now for tire width. For a build around 700 horsepower and around 650 pounds of torque, you're going to want around 245s in the front. If you have too much grip in the front, it's going to be way too snappy during transitions, so you're not going to be able to keep your angle that well. Alright, for rear tire width, I like around a 295 for a build around 700 horsepower. If you have too wide, you're not going to be able to get the wheels spinning, and then you're just going to get traction and straighten out. If you have not enough grip in the rear, your wheels are going to be spinning too fast, and that often results in spinning out. Alright, instead I'm going to go through every tuning option and tell you exactly what each thing does. Alright, tire pressure. What this does is it increases the pressure in the tire, obviously. What this does is it decreases or increases the size of the contact patch of the tire. This gives you more or less grip. So if you wanted less grip in the rear, which is the usual with a drift car, you want to lower the tire pressure. That way you get a bigger contact patch giving you more grip. In the front you want less grip, That way your steering isn't so much effective. That way you can use your throttle more to steer. So for a drift car in a default tune, you probably want to do around 40 psi. Gearing we'll talk about in a second. Alright, so for alignment, in a default tune I usually run about -2 degrees front camber and -0.5 degrees camber. The reason for this, the front camber helps you turn in, which this gives you the ability to swing your car wider and get more angle and still be able to come back from that. Rear camber doesn't really matter too much, but it's just been -0.5 has been my default tune since around Forza 4. For toe, you want to put the rear at about -0.5. You can play with this. I don't really know if it affects it too much, but this has just been my default for a long time. At caster, I leave at around 6.5. It is not always default for 6.5 for every car, so you want to make sure it's around there. You usually want to keep this around 5.5 to 7, but I like it at 6.5. Alright, anti-roll bars. This is very similar to springs as well as damping. This is very, very important. So, if you are doing your drifts and you're spinning out a lot, what you want to do is you want to stiffen up the rear. That way there is less weight being thrown in the back. That way you're getting less angle and it makes it more controllable. Also, softening the front has the same effect as stiffening the rear. Alright, it's kind of the same deal with springs. If you're spinning out too much, what you want to do is you want to stiffen up the rear and then soften up the front. If you're not able to get a lot of angle, you want to do the opposite. You want to stiffen up the front and you want to soften the rear. When you're tuning a drift car, this is like what you want to be focusing on. You don't want to focus on the alignment too much. What you want to do is you want to even out how much weight is being thrown in the front of the rear of the cars instead of messing with the alignment too much, like I said. Alright, for ride height, you're going to want to lower this about all the way. This has been the standard for a long time, and I don't really think many people mess with this that much, but you can if you want. Alright, damping. This doesn't really need to be messed with too much, but what I suggest is moving the rear, or making the rear a little bit softer than the front, for both rebound and bump stiffness. If you're spinning out, you want to stiffen up the rear and soften the front, and if you're not getting enough angle, you want to stiffen up the front and soften up the rear. Alright, for aero, we don't mess with this. You can if you want. I couldn't give you any advice on it because I don't do it. Alright, braking. You want to leave braking balance at 50%. This is very, very important for tandems and also just kind of in general for drifting. Let's say you have 55% balance in the front. What this is going to do, it's going to brake your front wheels harder, which in turn is going to make you spin whenever you're hitting the brakes. If your rear is too high, or is it, let's say, 45%, what's going to happen when you hit the brakes is that your front is going to keep going forward and you're probably going to end up straightening out. So you want this at 50% so that way when you brake, you just kind of keep going at the same angle. Alright, for braking pressure, I prefer it at 200%. This really doesn't make too much of a difference. It's just kind of just my default. You can mess around with it and see what it does yourself. Alright, differential. Acceleration, you always want at 100%. This is very, very, very important. For deceleration, I prefer it at 0%. I don't really ever mess with it, so I couldn't give you guys too much advice on what exactly it does. But acceleration at 100% is very, very important. What this does is it keeps the wheels spinning at the same speed regardless of what angle you're at. If you're oversteering a little bit too much or spinning out too much, you could try and mess with this, lower it a little bit to reduce that oversteer, but I just always prefer it at 100%. Alright, gearing. A lot of the time, this doesn't need that much adjustment. Usually what I do is I will shorten the final drive a little bit, and then I will take the third gear, and you see the top of the third gear line that's now pink. You want to move that to where it's around 100 and, let's say, 40 miles an hour, which I guess would be around there. And this is for a build with around 700 horsepower. If you have more or less, you just got to play with it until you find the right amount. Usually what I do now is I bring the other gears closer towards the third gear, which is my main drifting gear. So I bring in fourth, I bring in fifth, and I bring in sixth. What bringing them closer does is it makes you able to downshift or upshift quickly and still keep the wheel spinning if you need to take a tight turn or if you need to go wide. If you ever find you're bouncing off the red line too much, what you want to do is you want to take your final drive and move it to the left. What this does is it increases the speed that your tires have to spin at to reach the max RPMs of that gear. If you find that when you're drifting and you're nowhere near the red line, what you want to do is you want to take your final drive and move it to the right. So what you want to do is you want to find that happy medium between lowering it and raising it. If you're bouncing off the red line too much, that means your power output is very inconsistent. And if you're nowhere near the red line, that means you're very, very close to gaining traction and ruining your drift. Alright, so now you hopefully know just about every aspect of drift tuning. If you guys are confused about anything or have any questions, feel free to comment on this YouTube video.